Saying on my phone, I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone, they've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So, and if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, and take out, just telling you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us today. For those of you who don't know who that fine gentleman is, that very masculine man, Governor Tim Walz, remember the vice presidential candidate and Kamala Harris, man who's been making headlines lately, looking to make a run in 2028. Well, we're going to start today's show with our numbskull of the day, and it's none other than Governor Tim Walz cheering on the demise of Tesla. Now, why would he do such a thing? An American company, run by Elon Musk, a lot of jobs here in America, providing electrical vehicles, which they say is good for the environment. By the way, in just a few moments, we're going to be joined by Marc Morano of ClimateDepot.com to take up all the EPA environmental things happening under President Trump and this administration. But we wanted to start today's show with our numbskull of the day, who happens to be, like I said, Governor Tim Walz. So cheering on the demise of Tesla and the share price, what Tim Walz either doesn't realize or fails to mention is that his state, their pension fund, holds 2 million shares of Tesla stock, estimating about $362 million of the state's pension fund. So Tim Walz is cheering against his own people, cheering against the pension fund of people in his own state, the school teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, the sanitation workers, anyone who's a state and city employee who's in that pension fund? Is this man really that stupid? I mean, there's no nice way to put it for Mr. Tim Walz. This man wants to run for president of the United States, and he's cheering for the demise of an American company that employs many, many Americans, even in his home state. And their pension funds depend on this American company doing well. Mind-blowing to me. In other news, in another Marxist-run state, the New York Supreme Court this week has struck down a law that would have allowed non-citizens to vote in municipal elections. In 2021, the New York City lawmakers passed a bill that would give non-citizens and illegal aliens the right to vote. The new measure would give 800,000 green card holders and illegal alien dreamers the right to cast a vote in the ballot. City Council bylaw passed that law with lawmakers and expected this to go into effect, but the New York Supreme Court saying, not so fast, hold your horses. And over the next week or so, we can start to see the dismantling with an executive order of President Trump dismantling the Department of Education. Now, since 1979, the U.S. Department of Education has spent over $3 trillion with really nothing to show for. What it has to show for? Math and reading scores for 13-year-olds are at the lowest levels in decades. 6 and 10 fourth graders, nearly 3/4 eighth graders are not proficient in math. Folks, this is in America. 7 and 10 fourth grader and eighth graders are not proficient in reading, while 40% of the fourth grader students don't even meet basic reading levels. Standardized test scores have remained flat for decades, and U.S. students ranked 28 out of 37 in the OECD member countries in math. So what has the Department of Education been doing for all these years? I mean, we know in some states they've sort of turned it Marxist, where you've got illegals in the classrooms who don't even speak the language. Teachers have been forced to cater towards it. And I've been saying this for weeks here on this show. Getting rid of the Department of Education is excellent. It's sort of like Roe v. Wade and turning abortion back to the states. If you live in a Marxist-run state, you'll be able to have abortions. Same thing with education. If you want to send your kids to a terrible school where maybe in a few years they'll be teaching in Spanish, to meet the needs of those illegal aliens who are evading the schools here, that's fine. If New York wants to do that, if New Jersey wants to do that, if California wants to do that, that's fine. They'll remain low in test scores and things like that. Now, if you want your kids to get a good education, you're going to jump ship. You're going to move to Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. maybe parts of Pennsylvania that aren't completely radicalized. You guys are going to move out to the Midwest. You're going to move to states like Texas, where you know your kids are going to get an education free of indoctrination and stupidity. So we're going to be following this over the next few weeks and where it goes and the plans moving forward for the Department of Education and giving the power back to the states to govern their own body and govern their own education department, which is, we think, a great thing for America and for students. Folks, as I said, our guest today is the CEO and founder of ClimateDepot.com, Marc Morano. I felt there's so much to talk about with the climate change agenda and everything that President Trump is doing to get rid of the green new scam and the destruction it's caused to America. Marc, it's always great to have you with us here on the Great America Show. I asked you to come on because I'd like to check in. I want to see what's going on with the planet. It's another day. It's a new week. We're the end of a week. The planet is still here. We're all still alive. What's going on? I've been told, Marc, for the last 10, 20 years that we're going to be dead any day now because of global warming. And every day I wake up and look outside and it's either cold or freezing here in the middle of winter. What's going on?
Very simple. And I think this was Grist Magazine last November, 2024, nailed it. Trump wins, planet loses. The planet is about to expire. There's no other way. CBS News, where the tipping points are accelerating. Everything's coming to a head at this moment. And there's no other explanation for it. Every bad thing that's happening in weather is due to Donald Trump's presidency. That's what the media, literally what the media is promoting right now. It's a lot of fun to see all this just continue. And it's been a little bit, in some ways, quieter because, the first, what is Trump in 60 days now or something? Yeah. Because they're sort of laying low, but they're just now, the last 10 days have started ramping up a lot of the hysteria to sort of, I guess it excites their base, it excites the actor, it gets people riled up, the articles on 1.5, we're about to blow through the UN temperature goals. It's like, the UN temperature goals in 2007, they had 2006 or 7, they had a UN meeting of all the world leaders, and it was the most buffoonery you ever saw when they first came up with this. By the way, this is pulled from thin air. These temperature goals they come with. The idea of a global average temperature is complete nonsense. There have been peer-reviewed studies showing that they're statistically meaningless. They're just pulling data from different parts of the world with uneven coverage, and they come up with some baseline number and then a temperature. Anyway. World leaders at this summit, this goes back to 2007, I'm almost positive now. They stood around and they're like, I will limit the Earth's temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Then I'll do 1 degree. There was like an auctioneer where they're selling cattle, except these were world leaders claiming they were going to limit the Earth's temperature 100 years after they're dead. This is the kind of world in which we live. But hey, they have the science behind them.
How would you even do that?
Well, it's all based on the idea of if we restrict carbon dioxide and follow the net zero, this then equals doing a sophisticated scientific formula based on state-of-the-art climate models, which don't even account for half the variability in nature. And even the climate model advocates admit aren't predictions. They're just merely emission scenarios. They claim that if they come up with certain restrictions on human activity, i.e. industry and transportation and our diets and methane, that they'll come out with an exact temperature based on calculations of math. It is complete bunk. And I will say this, the Aztecs, who used to pull out organs and kill people to sacrifice for the gods to end droughts, probably had a more effective climate control program than the United Nations and these leaders touting net zero.
The only way to do that, Marc, is to hold your breath. So if these folks think eliminating carbon dioxide works, then why don't they show us how it's done and hold your breath and see how long you last, and we'll see. I mean, do you want to live or do you want to?
On that point, I posted at Climate Depot. You can look it up. I think it's Sierra Club. They had a whole analysis. Human breath. We inhale oxygen. We exhale carbon dioxide. About 2 pounds per person per day of carbon dioxide. Now, if you are running marathons, if you're intense biking or some kind of exercise, your exhaling of carbon dioxide could reach 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds. And then you have people like Professor Matthew Lau from NYU, who literally talk about reducing the size of people. Shorter people have smaller carbon footprints. So the idea is he wants to actually inject kids and alter their growth plates so that they're not taller, so that they'll have smaller footprints and lower CO2 emissions. This is really scary stuff. And this is what Donald Trump's presidency saved us from, because the more we went down this road, the less democracy and choice they would ever give us to reject this stuff.
Oh man, I could see a lot of men happy about that, about the shortening of man, I'm about 6'2", so I've never had an issue with that, but I have a lot of short friends who deal with it. The women won't be happy, I can tell you that. No woman likes a short man, just from personal experience. But it's not just these far left lunatics, Mark, who push this nonsense. It's the media. It's these news networks that we tune into each and every day that we're supposed to be trusting. We're supposed to trust these people as gospel. When you turn on ABC News and CBS News, you're supposed to take that as no bias, just news, no nonsense to it. But CBS recently, and by recently I mean probably the last 10 years, has taken it upon themselves to be social justice warriors, ESG warriors, DEI warriors. They've even have a national environmental correspondent. His name is David Schlechter. And he had this to say about climate change, and he's warning us. Take a listen.
I think the biggest risk is that we have a small window to deal with climate change, really. I mean, it's getting smaller and smaller, less than 10 years to sort of level out and reduce our emissions. And we had and have currently a lot of rules that deal with that. To throw those all out would undo a lot of progress that's been made to try to reach these new standards for our country and for the world, and we will lose our opportunity to really get ahead of this problem or even stay current with the problem.
That was from Media Research Center, Newsbusters. They do a great job. They pull all the hypocrisy. Brent Bozell's people over there. Shout out to them because they are terrific. But Mark, it's insane. I mean, it's like if you're just a normal person, and there are people, being in this world of politics, I always think it's hard to believe like there's people who are apolitical, who don't know what's going on. But there's a lot of people out there who just don't know what's going on. And you know what? They're probably far happier than you and I, to be honest with you. I wish I didn't know what was going on. But you've got these people out there who don't know what's going on, who maybe occasionally turn on CBS or ABC, and they hear something like that, and they're like, holy crap, we're dying. How do these people get away with this stuff?
Well, you know what it reminds me of? And if you can go back any random day in like 2020, 2021, watch CBS News, watch ABC News. During the COVID hysteria, it was all about COVID case counts, mask mandates, and how we have to get cases. That it was all just complete statistical bullshit. And that's exactly what he's talking about. When he talks about these tipping points and we're about to exceed this and we're running out of time. In my book, Green Fraud, I traced it back to 1864. Abraham Lincoln was in the White House when the first academic, George Marsh Perkins, warned of climatic excess unless mankind changed his ways. This is deep wired within our sort of human psyche to keep worrying. We have the AOC 10 years, Al Gore 10 years. You have the UN 10 years. In 1989, they issued their dire warning. We had 10 years to solve climate. So my answer to the CBS correspondent is very simple. Let's have the deadline now. Let's face the climate doom. Something tells me it's not going to be that bad. It's not even going to be noticeable. Just like the COVID doom. If you have to wear your mask, if you have to get the shot, you have to get the clot shot, or we're going to have the unbelievable, unprecedented, we're going to have Spanish flu death toll. Bullshit. Let's call the bluff. Let's ask for the climate doom now, and let's see how bad it actually is. And once we do that, you don't have to worry about the fear. It's coming. It's coming. No. It's got to be here by now. We've had centuries of warnings. Why isn't it here? That's what we should be asking.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up COVID, so now let's go down this rabbit hole a little bit and have some fun with it. I don't know one person, you tell me if you know someone, who says they're happy that they got the vaccine. And I know people, Mark, who've gotten, what's the max dosage? 5? I know people
I think it's higher than that now, like 8 or 9 if you were following all the CDC.
So I know people who've gotten every single one of them, and they're like, they're kind of resentful now. I didn't go ahead and get it because I said this is nonsense. I was like one of the first few thousand people in America to get actual COVID. And everyone was terrified of me that I was patient zero and I was going to kill all of Fox News because I was working there at the time. And I fought the thing. And what was crazy to me, and I was telling somebody this the other day, is I have a doctor who people joke is a television doctor. For those who watch Fox News, you guys can probably figure out who my doctor is. And I had said to him after I'd gotten COVID, what do I do? And he's telling me, go ahead and get the vaccine.
Yeah.
And I'm going, no, doc, I had COVID though. Why am I going to get the vaccine? Well, it's good to have extra immunity, but no, I tested the other day and I still have like a really high level of antibodies. Yeah, but you should get it. It'll protect you anyway. And for me, Mark, as I was like a 27-year-old kid, a 28-year-old kid at the time, having to question my doctor. I have no background in doctor. I have basic level earth science and chemistry from high school. But I'm sitting here and I'm questioning my doctor. And I'm like, now that I think back at it, like, it's crazy that we went through a time where we're questioning industry professionals, people who spent 10 years of their lives in school to try to put us down a better path to make us live a healthier life, gearing us towards the complete opposite. And I feel like it's the same exact thing with the climate change. What's your thoughts?
It's exactly the same thing. Not only should you question your doctor, you should question your climate scientist. And I too, like I absolutely didn't even consider the COVID vaccine for one simple reason. I didn't trust a single person pushing it at that point. Yeah. I didn't trust Anthony Fauci, the CDC. I didn't trust any of the public health people, my local public health. And at that point, I didn't trust doctors either. So it wasn't even on my radar of things to consider. And even my mom, who's 95 now, she didn't get the vaccine. I had my aunt. I had to fight. My aunt was in a nursing home at the time, lived to a ripe old age of 98, and even got COVID. And I had to fight to have her. She originally got the first dose, and then they wanted to give her a booster. And I had to fight the whole nursing staff. And then they imposed all these regulations on her, a restrictive of movement in the nursing home because she wouldn't get the booster. This was the
put her in a cage.
What's that?
I said they probably tried to put her in a cage.
Yeah, I mean it was a dark chapter, and I think, I partially blame Donald Trump for starting it. Although Trump obviously wasn't president, Trump would never have done vaccine mandates. Yeah. But Trump did push this Operation Warp Speed, which is the last thing you'd ever want to do in America again, and you shouldn't have done it the first time. And the idea is you don't want to rush a vaccine when you know who's in charge, people like Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, the World Health Organization pushing certain things. You don't want to rush something that you know could easily be mandated, especially with all the hysteria. So that was the problem, even going that route. And we need to go back. We need to have provisions in the future where you can never have a rushed vaccine, no matter how emergency they think it is. And that vaccine, I mean, I've interviewed people and talked to specialists and doctors, and they say it could actually take the average person, it could take years off your life. It's because of the inflammation levels, and it keeps your spike protein higher, and it could cause all sorts of problems down the road, depending on the person, depending on your reaction. But in general, there's really no upside to that vaccine. So-called. I hate to call it a vaccine. Shot, we'll call it.
I agree with the jab. I agree with you on that about Donald Trump. But in his defense, I don't think he honestly knew, because he'd never dealt with something like that before throughout his time.
I understand. Yeah.
So, in his defense, I don't think he ever realized how deep the deep state was. I mean, he knew on one front, but not on the medical side, that it would ever come to that. And he's listening to Dr. Fauci and all these people who he presumed were good people because they have been around for 100 years. And he learned his lesson the hard way. I think he learned his lesson from his mistake on that. And
he's vindicated by appointing RFK Jr. So all is forgiven.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I want to take a quick break here, folks. We're talking with Marc Morano of ClimateDepot.com. I want to take up a few things when we return. Bloomberg's editorial department, they're cheering on communist China. What can they possibly be cheering them on about? 2024 was the hottest year on record. So these climate scientists, Bill Nye and the folks, may be right. Maybe we are melting. Climate change indicators have hit also record highs in 2024, according to UN new study. I'm going to pick Marc's brain when we come back and find out what's going on, if Marc's been lying to us or Bill Nye's been lying to us. Coming right back with Marc Morano. The website is ClimateDepot.com. Stay with us.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupting this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard My Pillows only $14.98. Queens $18.98. King size only $1 more. Body pillows $29.98. Multi-use My Pillow 2.0s with pillowcase $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to mypillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all My Pillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard My Pillows absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Marc Morano. ClimateDepot.com is the website, ClimateDepot.com. You can get all your great climate change news there, any kind of trolling. Marc usually makes a laughing stock out of these people, so a lot of it is satire, but it's actually real-world stuff. We wish it was satire. Marc, I want to turn to Bloomberg, of all people, rooting for China. I mean, absolutely insane. Bloomberg News goes all in for China. This is China's chance to prove it's a climate leader. Trump's rejection of the UN climate goals has offered China a rare opportunity to expand its global influence. China can produce the kind of change the world actually wants to see. Folks, once again, you can read this on climatedepot.com, where you got the actual Bloomberg article here, and then you've got Marc doing his good old trolling of these fools. What's going on, Marc?
Well, this was, just so we understand, this isn't some lone opinion columnist. This was the entire Bloomberg News editorial board issued this decree. And what they're trying to do is it's a warning to America, essentially, on one hand, that we're giving up leadership to China, and China is now going to get all those accolades. John Kerry's going to be happy with China and not the U.S. Can you live with that on your conscience? And there's basically saying that China, because it makes money off solar and wind and produces solar and wind panels, they look at that as, oh, look at how green China is. They ignore the fact that China is over half the world's coal. They ignore the fact that they're building a new coal plant on basically 1 to 2 every week constructing it, that they have the highest CO2 emissions in the globe by far, even though the U.S. is the highest historical emitter. But they're essentially saying that Trump pulling the United States out of the entire climate scam is China can now step in and be the world leader, and they're going to produce the kind of change we want to see. This is like just twisted stuff. They actually are cheering China on because China will fulfill this role rhetorically, and they'll go all kinds of BS, and who knows, they might come out with pledges now to try to, make themselves look so great next to U.S. and the Europe. By the way, the latest UN climate goals, most of the developed world, first world countries, which is a racist term back in the old days anyway, under DEI, couldn't say first world, you couldn't say third world. But most of those countries didn't even submit a response by the UN's latest deadline for their greenhouse gas emission targets. So Bloomberg News is like begging China to fill this void so that the media can just praise them. Keep in mind, they have a long history, not just Bloomberg, but New York Times. It was Tom Friedman, 2009. China's dictatorship allows an enlightened group of people to do what's right for the people, bypass the messiness of democracy. The former UN climate chief, Cristina Figueres, praising China's one-party rule as able to get things done. You had the Apple CEO praise China, saying Apple's and China's values are the same when it comes to climate change. You had Justin Trudeau said he admired China's basic dictatorship. So all of these woke Western leaders who have been in charge pre-Trump were literally all in on China's governing model, China's the whole global domination of all of the rare earth mining and all of the economics. Chinese EVs, by the way, look like they're going to knock Tesla out at this point, especially with the rate Teslas are being torched and no one seems to be able to stop it. And the sales are tanking because people aren't happy. The liberals who were once the base of Tesla aren't happy with Elon Musk. So it's incredible what's happening. And again, they're cheering on China's global dominance of the world. And I'm not even sure Donald Trump can prevent this. It's been so baked in for decades. All that we've done for China.
That brings us to our next issue here, and that is the Paris Climate Accords that Donald Trump pulled us out of, rightfully so. Only 15 countries, Marc, have met the latest Paris Agreement deadline. The latest filing for the deadline plans to slash the greenhouse gas emissions by fueling climate change has paused. Only 15 countries met it. Less than 8% of the 194 currently signed up to the Paris Agreement. Now, Mark, this is no little BS a PTA meeting club. This is a $100 billion initiative. That's just total nonsense. And the left went absolutely berserk when Donald Trump pulled us out of it, that the world is going to end. Everything's coming to an end, all because he pulled us out of this thing that nobody really gives a crap about.
Including China. China didn't even respond by the deadline.
No.
Yeah, what's funny about this is, 84 countries and only 8 responded. You go to these UN conferences, which are the giant floating parties around the world, everywhere from Bali, Indonesia, to multiple parts in South America. The one this November is going to be in a rainforest city in Brazil, which I guess we'll talk about with their clear-cut highways. But almost every single country and delegations are represented at those UN climate summits. So they want the benefits. They want to send their delegation. There have been stories on the food. They fly in private chefs. They have private jets fill the runways. They have parties and receptions every night. This is an awesome junket for every delegation of every country, and they almost all show up. I mean, I'm saying you may have like 5 out of 190 countries who don't show up at these summits, but when it comes time to actually play the UN's game, you get 8 countries that respond, to meet their so-called net zero goals.
It's so absurd, and like you said, they go presumably for the parties to mingle around and have some fun, and the hypocrisy of it all. It's like these left. It's the same thing with all of them. It's the World Health Organization people, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, all these people who are just full of crap. Come in on their private jets, which emit more carbon than they can breathe in a lifetime on one flight, carbon dioxide. And then they go there and practice not what they're preaching. They preach not what they're practicing. But the world lets them get away with it. There's a total double standard. Nobody says a word about it. And these people go out there. They go do their little week down in Brazil. They go out clubbing. They go out partying. Don't pay for $1 of it. And then they hop back on their private jets and go back to where they came from. The hypocrisy of it all is totally insane. I want to turn to some climate change indicators is what they call it, I believe. According to Axios, climate change indicators have hit record levels in 2024, according to a new UN, of all people, Mark, the United Nations. Yes. The average rate of sea level rise is 2.1 millimeters per year between January of 1993 and December of 2002, and accelerates to an average of 4.7 millimeters between the years January of 2015 and December of 2024. So now we're going to have to listen to the United Nations once again on what's going on in the world, because they're the world scientists. They're the people that we should trust. Isn't this like trusting the World Health Organization with COVID?
It's exactly like that. And even this World Meteorological, these are globalist institutions set up, funding from all the usual suspect billionaires, and they have all the usual globalists behind them. In terms of the actual science, interesting things on sea level. There's sea level, which has historically been done from tide gauges. And there's also a sea level that began in the early 90s from satellite monitoring. Now, there's a big jump in sea level rise monitoring when they switched over to satellite. So what do you think became their gold standard, because it showed higher, was satellite. And that's what they're showing you here. Satellites in space trying to measure millimeters that are at odds with what the tidal gauge shows. And you have people like Steve Koonin, who was the former Obama energy scientist who worked for, I believe, an NYU professor. He's come out and done all his analysis and showed there's been no acceleration in sea level rise. And to the extent, and what I mean is, there's always sea level rise. Don't get scared by sea level rise. The seas have been rising since the end of the last ice age, 10,000 plus years ago. That's the nature of the Earth. But during our lifetime, you wouldn't even notice it. It's several inches, maybe 6-7 inches over a span of someone who's 70 years old today in their lifetime. It's a normal thing for sea level to rise, and it's absolutely not related to any kind of CO2 emissions or human activity. It is related to one kind of human activity, though, when you deal with cities like Miami and along the U.S. East Coast and other cities around the world, where it's called subsidence, where they pump out too much groundwater, do too much construction, too much interruption, and the land sinks because of local development and water policy issues. And then the water comes in more and people say, oh, look, it's global warming, your SUV. No, it's not the SUV that caused it. You pumped all the groundwater out. So it becomes a local utility management issue of local governments and state governments. But in terms of sea level rise, there's no there to worry about. It's all exists in scary projections of the future. They also, in this indicator, warned about methane, which is another joke because there's been peer-reviewed studies, scientists saying that methane is the irrelevant greenhouse gas. It doesn't last long enough in the atmosphere. And by the way, if you're worried about cows, agriculture has been around for thousands of years. And suddenly in the year 2025, agriculture is going to somehow cause a climate catastrophe through methane. This is the basis for net zero meat restrictions. This is the basis for trying to push us to eat insects. This is the basis for the lab-grown meat that Bill Gates and Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos have been pushing, made from stem cells from a cow, sheep, pig, mixed with fetal blood, put into a steel vat, petri dish, and then put on a 3D printer and put all the additives and texture, the most highly processed, meat you could get. This is all the basis for this. It's just the same old recycled scare year after year, appealing to the same authority and the same claims, which are easily debunked by the growing number of scientists. And that's what Trump, by the way, there's at least 24 scientists that they're considering bringing in for his EPA scientific advisory board. And many of these are the foremost expert on greenhouse gases, Dr. Will Happer from Princeton University, former NASA scientist John Christie, Georgia Tech climatologist Judith Curry. These are some of the names they're talking about. It's incredible. And then we're going to listen to these global hacks. And many of these people aren't even any disciplines related to climate. A lot of them are just computer I guess you'd call them software engineers. They just do climate models and statistical analysis of what may happen, and they try to scare the public into that.
Yeah, sometimes that stuff is right, but oftentimes it's not right, and it's just the reality.
Very rarely right. I mean, they actually specify it into an actual climate prediction. It's almost never right. Yeah. It's only when, after the fact, they can say, well, a lot of times they do it by predicting both outcomes. San Francisco will have more fog, less fog. There'll be more hurricanes, less hurricanes due to global warming. There'll be more malaria, less. So no matter what happens, they predicted it. Like you predict both teams to win the Super Bowl, you're going to declare yourself a winner the next day.
You'll be 100% right 100% of the time. Funny you mentioned Florida, because Florida's like a piece of Swiss cheese. I mean,
yes,
you've got
Miami in particular has sinking. It's nothing to do with sea levels rising.
Right. So the oldest hotel in Miami's been there, I think, since like the 1930s. It's the Savoy Hotel on South Beach. If we listen to these people, that's almost 100 years now.
That should be underwater, right?
It should be underwater. Their pool's still there. The place is still there. This is the thing. Like, nobody calls these people out on like things that are you don't have to run through statistical data, Mark, to show someone that the hotel.
Yeah, and what they would say back is, well, we've had to do beach erosion and sand movements. But right, you can easily do that, even because sea level is always rising. Remember, it's been rising for 10,000 plus years. Look at places like the Netherlands, who've been mastered the art of how to hold back sea level and engineer it. It's not that complicated, and I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier and affordable to manage coastal erosion and subsidence and sea level rise, regardless of the cause. I won't even get into that, than it is to shut down your entire society and all your proven energy, and to start restricting meat, and to start giving you CNN's carbon passports to restrict your travel, and to come after gas-powered cars. Wouldn't you much rather have a local community do a sand restoration project on the beach? It's done all the time. It's affordable. It's tried and true. What are we panicking about?
And there's some places, Mark, that I'd argue, and I'm sure there's people who will disagree with me on this. You might even disagree with me on this. There's some places I don't think should have ever even been developed just based on strategic ocean. You look at New Orleans, Louisiana. They're like below the water table, yet the place will flood during a hurricane, it'll flood during whatever. And people are like, look, the global warming. Well, no, if you look at the water table, when you look at the sea level table, they're pretty much negative. They're underwater to begin with. What the hell do you think is going to happen? Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, yes. I remember that was 2000. Was that 2005, Katrina?
Was it Katrina?
Remember, it was the hurricane had a name, and it wasn't Katrina. It was global warming. And okay, so you have levees that were completely neglected, a city completely mismanaged, no proper evacuation, and you had essentially a hurricane hit in Hurricane Alley in the hurricane zone, and you're blaming that on that. Now, what's interesting is you can't really fault people for building originally, but you can fault FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, for just constantly rebuilding and funneling. At some point, you got to say, you know what, this isn't inhabitable, and if it is, you're on your own. We're not longer, and we're no longer guaranteeing this. And that's one of the things you'd have to look at. And each area, of course, is different on that. But there's always a risk anywhere on the coast, especially from North Carolina south. Or anywhere in the Gulf Coast. Is it called the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico? But I guess there's the
Gulf of America, Mark. No, there's some people. There's certain ways you have to do things. Where I'm from in Staten Island, New York, we had Hurricane Sandy, and I mean it did a bunch of damage. And there was supposed to be a seawall built for years and years and years. Dragged their feet. Now after the hurricane came through, they did some eminent domain, and they're gonna convert some of the land, so that it won't happen again. But that's what smart people do. That's what the marine engineers do. Other places, like you said, they just keep rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding. I want to take one more quick break here, Mark. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about what Axios says the world is experiencing a fever right now. I want to take up Tesla and what these Marxist lunatics are doing over there. The EPA and the Amazon rainforest. There's so much more to talk about. We're coming right back with Mark, folks. Stay with us.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com. You can catch all of his stuff there, ClimateDepot.com. Mark, before we get into some more juicy things, we've got some news to break here. Some suspected Tesla arsonists are hit with federal charges and acts of domestic terrorism. It's about damn time. So let me ask you, what's going on here? You have these people who 6 months ago, before Donald Trump almost got assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania, when Elon Musk endorsed him, people love the Teslas. They were saving the planet there, which I don't agree with because you can't dispose of the batteries ever. There's so much stuff into it. How do you produce the batteries in the charging stations? Oh, with greenhouse gases, fossil fuels. Okay, so it's just kicking the can down the road. But anyway, nonetheless, there's people who like the electrical cars and they serve a purpose. That's fine. You should be able to buy them. You should also be able to buy gas cars. So these people loved Elon Musk. They absolutely adored him because he was saving the planet in their eyes, even though you and I both know he wasn't. That's neither here nor there. Now, all of a sudden, 6 months later, these people have flipped the coin and they are all out, balls to the wall, trying to kill this man.
Yeah.
What's with the hysteria?
There is such deep set anger. You had the astronaut, Mark Kelly, now senator from Arizona, call him an a-hole and urge boycotting of it. By the way, Mark Kelly, the astronaut, when he was in space, I don't know, this was probably 10 years ago, said he could see climate change from the spaceship. Very similar to Tina Fey saying she could see Russia from her house playing Sarah Palin, which is an absurd comment. So he's a hardcore activist. You had Sheryl Crow have her Tesla towed away. They are so angry at Elon Musk. Partially, it's Elon Musk's fault. For years, he pandered to climate alarmists. He did all the rhetoric. He warned of all the same stuff we're making fun of today. I'm talking 10 years ago and beyond. Yeah. He started changing, post-COVID. He started re-examining, like a lot of other, I would say, liberals, he started re-examining. And I'm not saying I don't welcome him. I'm just saying his history. Yeah. He created this, is what I'm getting at that base. But then you have something else, besides just angry liberals. At the same time, you have a rise of this justifying by the radical left, the progressives, this eco-terrorism. The New York Times has profiled multiple times a guy from Sweden named Malmo who literally praises acts of terrorism as a way to get environmental awareness and make environmental action happen. The UK Guardian recently had an article talking about the wave of young, basically eco-terrorists who were torching SUVs and Teslas. And so they've justified this intellectually. If this isn't just a bunch of crazies, they're being now directed by aspects of this movement to do this. And I think the only way to do this is it has to declare these. I don't want government to go overboard in the sense that, it's always way too easy to use force. But I want them to go after them. They need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This needs to stop because this will get out of hand. And what's funny is the EV batteries that they're torching are much worse than lighting up a gas-powered car because you're going to get so many toxic plumes. And here's a funny thing. If these people would oppose EVs on the environmental standards, I'd be with them. It takes 500,000 pounds of material to dig up the earth. 500,000 pounds to make one average-sized Tesla battery, okay? That is not eco-friendly. That is not, that's better than a gas-powered car. If they had those kind of objections, it would make sense to me, but I don't want to see these cars torched and properly destroyed.
More to hate Elon on. I've got some more breaking news. Elon Musk's Doge has blocked a payment of $52 million to the World Economic Forum.
Oh, I didn't see that. Well, here's the problem. Okay, that sounds great, but it's going to be stopped by a Clinton or Biden judge within days, probably.
Yep.
Here's the problem. I love everything Elon's doing, and I've been a student of this kind of attempts at budget cutting going back to the 80s when you had David Stockman as Ronald Reagan's management and budget director his first term. It's very hard, but here's the problem. What they're doing is great. They're exposing all this absurdity. They might be actually hurting the cause by doing all this unilateral executive stuff on their own. What they really desperately need, and this is where I had a problem with this budget, what's it called? The continuing resolution. Yeah. They need Congress to follow up. We need to defund the Inflation Reduction Act. We need to overturn it. We need Congress to defund a lot of these programs and follow up with what Doge has done. The problem with what he's doing, it's great PR and it's great framing the narrative and it's great publicity to expose the fraud of the taxpayer money. But ultimately, it's going to get mired down, and I just don't know. It's great what he's doing, but I just don't know how effective this strategy is going to be long term, because eventually they're going to get stifled by every federal judge. And some legal scholars, conservatives may argue, there's a case here to be made until they've proven a case that this is absolute fraud and not just, we don't like the original intent. Judges are going to keep ruling against them. This happened with the Inflation Reduction Act money. Yeah. They claim fraud, but just takes one judge to say no. So all of that great stuff we heard about stopping is now being restarted or is being unfrozen. So it's a complicated mess. My message is this: Johnson and the Republican Congress, Speaker Johnson, have to get their act together. And unfortunately, I've seen no indication of that happening yet.
No, you're absolutely right. The way I see it is it doesn't hurt to try, which is what they're doing. But
no, actually, I'm not criticizing that. I think what they're doing is fantastic, but they just have to be careful because they're going to look like it's the same old song and dance until they get someone. They need backing. It's like they need the air support. You're a military operation. You're coming in. You're blowing up the front lines, but at some point you're going to need the backup from the sea or the air, and they're not getting that yet. They're out there alone, and eventually they're going to be surrounded, and it's going to be ineffective.
What I'm saying is best case scenario, they get existing payments canceled. Worst case scenario, they don't go into a budget next year, and these payments.
That's true. By highlighting it, that's true. Yeah,
so that's the way I see it. But you're absolutely right. Is these unelected judges, these bureaucrats who are America last? I think they've brought 129 lawsuits against the Trump administration. Last administration, President Trump's administration, I think it was 65, and that was the most in history. So these people are, they're ready, guns blazing. We find out now that an unelected bureaucratic judge has blocked the EPA for canceling a $20 billion grant for climate change. What's going on over at the EPA with Lee Zeldin and the boys?
He's been doing a fantastic, beyond what I would have imagined he could do. Yeah. Blows away any of Trump's first term EPA chiefs by far. Now, having said that, I think a lot of this is Donald Trump personally 2.0. He is issuing marching orders that he never would have allowed, never had in his first term. Lee Zeldin is going after exposing all this funding and working with Doge, by the way, and they're exposing stuff like Stacey Abrams getting tens of millions of dollars for these groups that didn't even exist, didn't even know how to submit a federal proposal or do a federal budget. Weeks before they got the money to put in, energy efficient appliances in homes. John Podesta overseeing billions of funds to Democratic donors and Democratic supporters. I mean, it's just unbelievable. As the undercover video said, from the time that Kamala Harris lost the election that Trump was sworn in, it was like the EPA was just throwing gold, the Biden EPA was throwing gold bars off the Titanic. They were just pumping money out to all their friends as much as they could. And once again, we need Congress to come in and return that. Now, Lee Zeldin issued 31 new orders, revolutionary day. He actually quoted me indirectly a week before in Bloomberg News. I had said that the CO2 endangerment finding of the EPA is the holy grail of the climate activist movement. And he said, this has been called the holy grail. And he repeated that phrase, paraphrasing me. He's going after the CO2 carbon dioxide endangerment finding that began under Biden and continued under Obama, other way around, it began under Obama, continued under Biden, that regulates carbon dioxide as a pollutant. And they're going to go after the scientific basis for that. This is the key regulation that Trump failed to go after as EPA the first term. And this goes after the EV mandates, gas-powered car bans, solar and wind mandates, offshore wind, any meat restrictions, methane, the entire basis for all of the green nonsense that the states use, cities use. If we can overturn this, and it's going to take a year or two, and it's going to be a legal case, and there's going to be judges, going to the Supreme Court, this is how you get America free of the climate scam once and for all. That, and there's talk of Donald Trump submitting the UN Paris Agreement to the United States Senate as a treaty to be rejected. And then the next president can't just say, we're back in the Paris Agreement. They'd have to sign a new agreement with the United Nations. This treaty, which we have now, the UN Paris, goes back to the 1990 Rio Earth Summit treaty that George H.W. Bush, Republican president, signed and got us into this whole UN climate mess and net zero.
So you're optimistic that we can get this thing turned around?
It's a lot of work, but yes, I think we can. And I get excited when I heard Steve Bannon say that Donald Trump's planning on running for re-election, and they're working on a legal strategy. You can't do more than 2 consecutive terms at a time, meaning that he theoretically could qualify as a third term. So anyway, the reason I like that is because Donald Trump is as good as a president we're going to see in our lifetime because of the hell he's been put through. No other president is going to be as authentic and as strong as him. There's just nothing we can do. I would absolutely be open to a way he could run for a third term.
We all would, but
it's probably not going to happen. I'm just having some fun. But that's what Steve Bannon had some fun.
It's 100% not going to happen. I'm not sure what route Steve Bannon's taking or what he's coming up with. But what do they call it? Click porn.
Yes, I fell victim to that. So sorry.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people did, and I don't think it helps the call. I really don't. Think it helps the cause. It doesn't help Trump's agenda. I think. No,
I understand. But I mean, I'm saying it more as a point.
I'm with you.
Is that it's hard to think. I mean, even J.D. Vance. It's just
there's nobody.
5 years ago, he was all into the green scam. He called Trump Hitler. Yeah. You look at Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't know if I trust these people.
No.
Like, who knows? Elon may. I don't know if there's no one that's been there long term enough that I really trust to run to replace Trump.
No, you're absolutely right. Dan Scavino, who's one of Trump's closest allies. But there's a lot of people, Mark, who turn the corner. And you know what? I'm sort of in the same camp with you where I don't trust anybody. But the way I look at it is there's some people now who have started to prove themselves, and it's guys like Marco Rubio. I was a fan of Marco Rubio.
I'm stunned by Marco Rubio.
Right.
I'm beyond his positions. It's just his personality and the way he's handling the media. It's unbelievable. Not that I even agree with everything Trump's doing. I get a little nervous when Marco Rubio goes on TV and talks about the national security. Even if you're on a visa, I just don't like to see free speech crackdown. And I know you could argue they're terrorists and they're not subject to that, but I just don't like that. I don't like it. It rubs me the wrong way somehow, regardless.
They're going after guys who are here on green cards. Those people aren't afforded the same rights.
I know that, but still, it bothers me just because he invoked national security, and I don't like that. It bothered me. It reminded me of a lot of other things from 9/11 and the surveillance state and everything else. So anyway, that's the only area I disagree with them on. Is just that whole idea of they need to go after the people, but I just don't know. I feel uncomfortable because it's a chilling effect on all free speech and any protest, even legitimate ones and ones that don't involve violence and taking over buildings. So
now
anyway, that's my 2 cents.
You've managed to piss the hell out of the audience by now at this point. I mean, the way I see it, Mark, is that if they're American citizens, you're afforded the right of free speech. You're afforded the right of peacefully protesting. But if you're a foreigner, you're here on a visa. You're here as the other way I look at it too, Mark, is if we go to any other country in the world, north of our border, south of our border, west and east, our asses are in jail if we do that. So
I understand that. And I understand the argument. Yes, I do understand that about they're not U.S. citizens. It still has a chilling effect even on U.S. citizens. And I don't like the national security that you mentioned Rubio. That's what triggered it in my head. But, maybe I'm watching too many left-wing bloggers go off about this, but it just, I want them to be consistent on free speech, and I don't want them to go overboard. Again, if there's violence or anything like that, I just don't let every group to have a chilling effect. So that's all. I agree with you, though. They're not U.S. citizens, but
they haven't. I mean, this is the only person, I think, to the best of my knowledge, that has faced any sort of repercussions. So, I mean, you look at those people at the Elon Musk's dealership in New York City. The only ones who were arrested were the ones who were doing violence. Everyone else is now. We don't agree with them. We think they're idiots, but they're free to protest
and that's good. Yes,
January 6th. So that's the way I see it.
Well, maybe it was the way Rubio said it, because I rewatched that interview, and he said, he said who says anything that's contrary to the national security interests of the U.S., that's as defined by the government. That makes me uncomfortable.
He was talking about, I know the interview you're talking about, he was talking about the questionnaire form that these people have to fill out. Do you have any intention of doing this when you come to the country?
Okay. Yeah, just in the past, I just don't like anything to be declared that you're a violation of that. But anyway, it goes back to even the torture of Dick Cheney. Those weren't U.S. citizens at Guantanamo, but eventually that kind of behavior ends up being used on U.S. citizens. And even though these are Visa cards, that's all. I'm just throwing that out there.
The Patriot Act you're describing now.
It is, but I mean, it's the same concept. Even though, if you're here on a Visa, you have to look at it historically. But anyway, I'm not, again, it's not my issue that big. I'm just saying it makes me uncomfortable, and I'm just warning them not to go overboard on that in terms of.
Mark, the good news is this is America. And if you don't want to be here, it sounds like you're running a dogfighting ring over there.
Yes.
But no, the good news is it's America, Mark. If you don't like to be here, you can, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying these people, if you don't agree with our values, take your shit and get the hell out of here. I mean, there's so many other countries you can live in this world. Even the American people. I hate Rosie O'Donnell, but you know what? Good for her. She finally kept her word and got the hell out of the country. Ellen DeGeneres. I think she had other problems.
Well, it doesn't help when I don't even like Donald Trump criticizing 60 Minutes should be shut down. I know they're off the cuff comments, but you need to be careful with stuff like that. That's all. Because again, when you're in power, it's easy to not like to hate the people you disagree with and want those kind of actions. Trump has made a couple just off the cuff, Trumpian comments. I don't hold it to him, but I'm just saying in general, they have to be careful with those kind of comments.
No, and I think he understands, because nobody's free speech has been infringed upon more than him. He was removed. He was deplatformed from every single platform.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, getting off this tangent that we're on, I want to talk about the Amazon rainforests that are currently being bulldozed as we talk. That's sacred ground. What's going on?
This is amazing. I did an Amazon rainforest documentary, which released in 2000. And I went to the Amazon multiple times. I interviewed the local ecologists. First of all, the whole idea of the Amazon disappearing was BS. Second of all, for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are being regenerated. Having said all that, in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, that was the number one environmental issue. You had Sting's annual rainforest concert. I interviewed Donald Trump, by the way. First time I ever met him was at the Sting's rainforest concert. I think it was 98 or 99. I think it was 99. And this was a celebrity cause at the time, pre-global warming. Well, the whole issue was all these poor developing countries with rainforests weren't allowed to allow people to clear it for they were allowed to do it, but they had all these restrictions for agriculture. They were keeping people poor. They weren't letting them use the natural resources. So that's what we were fighting, allowing the poor indigenous people, the poor residents to be able to use their natural resources. Well, turns out all these restrictions were just melted away. A UN climate summit, COP30, is coming to Belém, Brazil, a rainforest city. And the city, because it wants to be on showcase for the world for the United Nations climate summit, is clear-cutting thousands of acres for a 4-lane highway of tropical, virgin, untouched rainforest in their phraseology. And this is hilarious because they're going to be flying in on private jets and they're going to be transporting people on the highway. And the BBC, give them credit, they interviewed local people. This highway is not accessible to the locals. They're putting up a giant wall cut through the jungle. So the people who live in the jungle cities or near it have no access to the highway. They'd have to go huge swaths of land and long mileage around to even get to the highway. You probably don't even own a car. But this is just another example of the global elites get what they want. Decades, poor people weren't allowed to access the forest and use it because the global elite thought they had to preserve it like a museum or a zoo. Suddenly, they authorized quick clear cutting for the power brokers from the UN and the World Economic Forum.
And I would almost bet you $1 million, Mark, that none of those people who live in the area are even afforded jobs to help build that highway. It's probably these globalist elites who've brought in their multi-billion-dollar corporations to build the road, and they're not paying for it because it's probably – I'd even go as far as to guess that the Americans are somehow paying for it or helping pay for it in one way or another. Absolutely insane. Marc Morano, it's always great talking with you here on the Great America Show. ClimateDepot.com. You get the last word. Anything you want to say, the floor is yours.
No, I mean, this is just unprecedented. Again, the most consequential presidency in our lifetime, Donald Trump. I think I can say that after 60 days. Changing all the – you could argue Ronald Reagan. I think you have to go back to FDR, really, to get to this level of just cultural change that we're seeing in America. So with that, my website's Climate Depot. I'm Twitter @Climate Depot. And I'm sorry if I've offended your listeners on the, whole free speech issue, but it's an area, especially coming from COVID and everything. I'll do some more research. I totally agree with you about them being non-citizens and there's a different standard, but we just have to be careful of the effect on it as well, of the chilling effect, even for citizens.
Yeah, and like I said to you, I think Donald Trump knows that better than anybody because
and I agree with that.
Free speech has been infringed upon more than him, and he understands that. But at the same time, he's got a country to protect, and I said, you don't want to be in this country. You got a problem with who we support. If we support Israel and things like that, take your shit and get out. Marc Morano, ClimateDepot.com, folks. We recommend it to you highly. Always good reads there if you want some satire and some serious stuff at the same time. Marc, come back soon.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. And thanks to Marc Morano. ClimateDepot.com is where you can find Marc and all the work that he does, holding these leftists accountable, these Marxists who want to take over the world with their global climate initiative nonsense. Folks, we'll see you back here tomorrow. Hopefully, same time, same place, where our quest for truth, justice, and the American way continues. See you tomorrow. Till then, may God bless you. May God bless America, and may God bless the great Lou Dobbs. See you tomorrow.